Hello, vinyl community, and welcome to another edition of Pete's CD and Vinyl World. Today, I wanted to talk about a band that maybe some of you know and maybe some of you don't know, but it's a band called Angel. They came out in 1975, sort of a glam hard rock band, originally out of Washington, D.C. They were discovered by Gene Simmons, actually, and signed to Casablanca Records. And they put out 5 albums during the 70s. One of those bands that people have heard of, but like never really hit it big. None of their albums ever went gold. They were sort of a regional band. So, most notably, the singer is Frank Dimino. And the guitar player is Punky Meadows, who you might know from the Frank Zappa song Punky's Whips. It's about Punky Meadows. And the keyboard player is Greg Giuffria. So this is their first album, 1975, self-titled. This album's more on the prog hard rock realm. Most notably the song The Tower. Their first 2 albums, I would say, Greg Giuffria plays more like Rick Wakeman rather than just like a regular hard rock keyboard player. So this album is sort of like hard rock combined with like glam rock, sort of. But this is a pretty good album overall. And as you'll see they go along, the progginess and the heaviness sort of drifts into just regular rock and roll or even glam. Their second album is called Hell of a Band. And I would say this is probably their best album overall. It's pretty good from start to finish. So by this point, I would say their sound is almost like prog mixed with almost like pre-rainbow, sort of like Deep Purple-ish rainbow sound, along with starting to get into like, combined with like a sweet background vocal sound. The song Pressure Point definitely could be a Deep Purple song. The song Mirrors is a really heavy song. So basically, this band was sort of like the antithesis of Kiss. They were dressed in all white. They were all like good-looking type guys. But if you look closely, even though you always thought they wore the same thing, each of their white sort of jumpsuits were actually different. So they all had a unique costume. And again, for the Frank Zappa fans, that's Punky Meadows, who the song Punky's Whips is about. But yeah, I would highly recommend their first 2 albums if you're just a hard rock fan in general. In my opinion, basically the quality of their albums drifted as time went on. So the first 2 were produced by Derek Lawrence. But their third album, On Earth as It Is in Heaven, was produced by Eddie Kramer. But this is still a pretty good album. On the Rocks, really good song on here. Can You Feel It is probably the most well-known song. And in the same year, 1977, they also released White Hot, this album. Probably has their biggest known song, Ain't Gonna Eat Out My Heart Anymore. I think it was a regional hit in some areas. Don't Leave Me Lonely is a really good song. The Winter Song was actually a song they did on American Bandstand. That clip's on YouTube. So, this was produced by Eddie Leonetti. These both came out in 77, I believe. Yeah, and if they had combined the songs onto one good album, it would have been their best album. But there's a little bit of filler on both of these, so half of these albums are pretty good. The rest is kind of eh. Their next and final album came out in '79. This is also produced by Eddie Leonetti, and this one's called Sinful. On these two, you're really starting to hear the Sweet influence more. The prog is starting to go away, and they've gotten into the more glam, hard rock, Sweet sound. By the time they get to this album, they've just drifted off into complete, almost like, imagine if David Cassidy or Leif Garrett had done a hard rock album. That's what this album sounds like. And it's funny because Ron Haggerty just did the vinyl tag for the White Album, and he showed this and he said, "Oh, this is my favorite Angel album," but actually it's my least favorite because of those reasons. The songs are okay, but they're very dated, and they almost sound like if you ever saw like a TV show from the 70s or early 80s where there's like a fictional rock band, and they've got like cheesy songs they're playing. That's what kind of like this is. And obviously it didn't work because this one didn't do that well either. It's kind of odd because they had such a huge stage show and the costumes and everything, and a lot of money was put into this band, but they just couldn't break. They had some success in different regions of the country. So back then, even bands on major labels were signed to, had different success throughout the country. They would headline theaters, I think, throughout the 70s. They also opened for various bands like Styx. But the funny thing is they never opened for Kiss. And I have a feeling that that's really what held them back being on Casablanca Records, because if you think about it, no other band besides Kiss made it big. No other rock band. So to me, it's like they sort of held them back, really. Frank Dimino has really great vocal range. Sort of sounds like a cross between Geddy Lee, Rick Emmett from Triumph, and Joe Lynn Turner, sort of. On the first, I would say the first two albums really has that Geddy Lee vibe. And even some of their songs have that vibe from the very first Rush album. You got that on here. They released their live album, Live Without a Net, in 1980. By this time, they were pretty much dead in the water. But the funny thing is, they also appeared in a movie called Foxes. Sort of a teen high school movie. Came out in 1980. Starred Jodie Foster and Cherie Curry, who was the singer of the Runaways. And Jodie Foster's dad actually plays Angel's road manager in the movie, and there's a short concert clip of them playing in the movie and everything. They did 2 songs for that soundtrack. One of them was 20th Century Foxes, which is on this. And that song is sort of like a ripoff of I Was Made for Loving You, sort of a disco feel. I'm really surprised on the Sinful album they didn't actually go for a disco sound. But they did it on that song. It didn't work either. So at that point, I guess the band broke up. They also do a cover of All the Young Dudes on here, which is pretty good. Pretty good sounding live album. So basically the band was inactive for about 20 years. 1999, Frank Dimino put out an Angel album called In the Beginning, which is basically him with a bunch of musicians, and I think Punky Meadows plays some guitar solos on it. And last year they just put out a new album called Risen, which is basically Frank Dimino, Punky Meadows returning full time, and a bunch of other musicians. That one I heard actually online, and it's pretty good. It's not as good as their older material. The one that came out in '99 is kind of like a Frank Dimino solo album. Since Angel originally broke up, he did some soundtrack work, Frank Dimino, and some voiceover stuff. Surprisingly, I can't believe he didn't actually become the singer of Rainbow after Graham Bonnet left in 1980, because he has that perfect voice. He could have fit in perfectly doing the Joe Lynn Turner parts. But, you know, I first was aware of them back in the old days. I used to see their photos in magazines, and somehow I saw that promo reel that Casablanca Records put together of them just performing on stage, like a mix of a few songs. Somehow I saw that either on, I don't think, it had to be pre-MTV. But this is the first time I got for them, probably about at least 25 years ago or so. And I listened to it and I thought it was just okay, and I put it away. So over the years I've been collecting all the other albums. I mean, now I like them a lot more. But to me, they're just a curious band because there was so much money invested in them and they just never went anywhere, really. And the other thing, too, is there's not a lot of footage of them. There's a couple of live clips here and there on YouTube. Apparently, they had a lot of stuff filmed because they were supposed to do a Kids Are All Right type documentary on them during the 70s. And I heard in an interview that that footage was destroyed or just it's missing. Punky Meadows actually was the replacement for Ace Frehley in Kiss for one day. Apparently what happened was Ace Frehley was leaving Kiss in 1982, so they were auditioning a bunch of guitar players. He went in and auditioned. They asked him to join the band. Apparently he had either some recording to finish up or some kind of touring gig for the next 2 weeks. So he called them and told them. And after that, they just said, forget it. So it's kind of odd because he was already a well-known guitar player. I wonder what makeup he would have worn, or if he would have even used the name Punky Meadows, because everybody would have known who he was. But, you know, it's kind of cheese rock at its best, I guess. It's surprising they didn't make it big, but also not surprising just because of their image and everything. But anyway, I just wanted to talk to these guys about. I didn't do a ranking of worst to best because basically you could just go by the order of release from best to worst. Their second probably being their best, but you could argue that the self-titled first one is the best. So anyway, let me know your thoughts on Angel. Or if you haven't heard them, go check them out, especially their first two albums. Like I said, the song The Tower is awesome. Anyway, if you like these videos, please subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks.